Hello, my name is Michael Keith, and I am going to present on the systems thinking of LDS Dissent. So, some of the goals I have for this presentation is to show how we treat dissent currently in the LDS Church, show how we can change the way we look at dissent, outline the problems we are facing, explain how we can improve, and ultimately to increase LDS membership and strengthen the community. A little bit about me, the presenter. Again, my name is Michael Keith. I'm a student at Utah Valley University. I'm working on my international business undergrad degree at Utah Valley University. I grew up a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints my whole life, born and raised in Utah. I served a mission in Brazil. I've always been an active member. I continue being an active member. I'm currently serving as my ward's executive secretary. And I want to find a way to increase kindness in the LDS community. And a little bit more about me is I've never really done a podcast. I've listened to quite a few, but I've never done one. I'm just a guy with a message that feels it's really important enough to share with anyone and anyone in my church. So, I'm going to begin today by speaking about how we as LDS members sometimes, a lot of times, think about apostates that we see on the news or that are around us. We may think that they are evil. We may think that they haven't thought enough about things, that they don't have faith, that they focus on things that don't matter. They are easily offended. They are overly negative. They want attention. A lot of things that we can say about them. Most of what we have to say focuses around this word they. And I don't think that's the best way to think about people inside or outside of the church. I don't think the word they is a really good word to use, and we'll kind of talk a little bit more about that as we go on. So, how we should think with this picture of Jesus on the side, we should focus on the positive aspects of the relationships we have with people who leave the church, and not just on the negative things. Realize that they are human beings, and that human beings act in the way they think is best, and human beings usually act rationally and with good intentions. And really, apostates of the LDS Church are no different. They're good people. They just have something that tripped them up along the way, some kind of doubt, and it might not even be their fault. So I think it's really important that we don't judge them, realize that we can reach out to them and still be good members, and realize that our disagreements don't define us. Try to be a little bit more like this Savior who always tried to reach out to those around him, no matter if they were in the church or out of the church or whatever. Jesus was a good example of somebody who reached out to everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've kind of thought to myself as the apostasy epidemic in the LDS Church, which has been going on for a few years, depending on who you ask, to a couple of decades. And it really started with the advent of the internet. And since the internet has made information so available, many members are learning things they didn't know before. And because of that, we get a lot of general conference talks that warn us about the dangers of the internet or whatever. And so it's easy to kind of blame members who fall away because of things they learned on the internet or through other sources, just new information that they got their hands on. It's easy to blame them and say it's their fault, but I don't think that's very productive, because they could turn around and say, it's whoever's fault. Everybody can place blame. I don't think it's very productive to place blame. I think we need to just realize that this is happening. A lot of members are falling away, and leave it at that. According to a report by John DeLynn, who is an LDS activist, active membership in the worldwide LDS Church is only about 1/3 of actual membership. And that number has been decreasing since 2011. Again, this is a report that John DeLynn did that's entitled Top 5 Myths and Truths About Why Committed Mormons Leave the Church. You can look it up online. It's on YouTube. It's on a couple of other places. And in this report, he talks about how the people who are falling away aren't always these stereotypical people that we think they are. They're not these lazy people, but actually they're former bishops, former mission presidents, former stake presidents, former elders quorum presidents, Relief Society presidents, leaders of the church, returned missionaries. Really, they're some of our best and our brightest members, and they're falling away, and in droves, more than we can keep up with new baptisms. And so for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to call this phenomenon of the last couple of years the apostasy epidemic. So, a couple of topics that cause doubts in Mormonism. Obviously, we've seen a lot of this female ordination in the news lately. We have also seen a lot of issues regarding same-sex marriage, really throughout the whole country, not just in Mormonism. LDS Church history is always a hot topic in Mormonism, it seems like. And there are other topics that cause people to fall away from the church as well. And you can think of what those are by yourself. Anyway, to prove that this is actually a real problem and not something that I or somebody else is making up, I found this quote by a general authority named Marlon K. Jensen, who's in the church history office. And he says, realize that maybe since Kirtland, we've never had a period of, I'll call it apostasy, like we're having right now, largely over these issues. The issues being the ones we just went over on the last slide. And this was in a 2011 Q&A at Utah State University in which he said this. Obviously, church leadership is concerned, and it's something that we should really be concerned about as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about the real problem. The real problem isn't that members have these ideas or these doubts and they start questioning things. The real problem is that when they try to question things vocally or express themselves, they're really met with a lot of resentment. People tell them they're sinning for having those doubts, or they shouldn't question, or they question their motives, and that's what really causes people to fall away more than anything else. It's not that they have the doubts, it's how their doubts are met. And they often feel disrespected, or as if they're having doubts means they can't be a part of the community. So really, this apostasy epidemic is part of a bigger overall system, which we will analyze in the next couple of slides. So how we can react to apostasy, we have two options. We can blame the people who are falling away for being weak, lazy, or whatever, and we can kind of forget about them and say they're a lost cause. Or we can analyze the underlying system of why people leave and make changes and hopefully bring people back and prevent more people from leaving in the future. We'll focus on the latter in this presentation. So, analyzing the system. We have to realize that people will stop going to church if the cost of going to church exceeds the benefit they derive from going. If they're having doubts is met with too much hostility for them to justify going, members aren't going to go. If the cost of going to church goes up too high, members will stop going. Conversely, people will go to church if the church meets their needs and wants. In economics, we call this the invisible hand, and it's when consumers and the market, and in this case we'll say consumers are church members, and we'll say the market is the church itself. It's when they interact with each other and create kind of this equilibrium outcome where they're interacting in the most optimal way possible. That's what the invisible hand means, and it exists in economics. It also exists in real life, in the church, as we'll illustrate on this graph. Again, I know this graph isn't perfect, but it does illustrate an accurate point. I've received a lot of this information from secondary data that's been published in different sources. Basically, the idea is on this supply and demand graph, which anyone who's ever taken an economics class is pretty familiar with this concept. On the x-axis, we have the net cost of going to church. That's the emotional wear and tear it takes on you. That's the inconvenience. And whatever else. You know, sometimes we think cost is just money, but it can be a lot of different things. And on the y-axis, we have our active membership. So, we have these other functions inside of the graph. We have a blue line, we have an orange line, and we have a gray line. The blue and orange line, which are negatively sloped, they are demand functions. They represent how when the cost of going to church is low, more people will go. When the cost of going to church is high, less people will go, and that's why they're negatively sloped. The gray function is a supply curve, which we won't really focus too much on. Basically what it says is that as more members join the church, the cost of retaining them is going to go up. Again, we're not going to really focus on the gray line except where it intersects with the blue and orange lines, and those are our equilibrium points. So the first place where they intersect is going to be our desired level of activity, which is 6 million members, which is the estimated level of activity before 2011 when active membership started to decrease. And that's where we want to get back to, but we are currently more along the lines of 5 million, which is about 1/3 of worldwide membership. So this big triangle up here, this is going to be what I call the unactionable inactive membership. It's a group of about 9 million members who, for whatever reason, have fallen away from the church, and it's going to be very difficult to bring them back. They pretty much disowned the church for one reason or another, or maybe they don't even realize they're members. There are plenty of members of the church on record who were baptized when they were really young, and they don't even realize that they're members. Some of them got baptized for a boyfriend or a spouse and have since fallen away and want nothing to do with the church. And some of these people are passed away and they're still on the membership records. And the church doesn't realize they passed away because it was so long since they had been to church when they were alive. So these 9 million members, they're going to be really hard to bring back. But there are another group of about 1 million members who have fallen away as part of this apostasy epidemic, which we can bring back, and they are represented by this little triangle. And if we focus on them and make some changes, we can bring them back, because these are a group of members who were very committed to the church. These were our elders quorum presidents, our relief society presidents, our returned missionaries, the people who at one time were committed to the church but have fallen away. And the reason they've fallen away again isn't because necessarily they had doubts, but because they were met with so much hostility because of the doubts that they had. And this is illustrated maybe a little bit easier to see on this slide. I've taken this concept from a book I'm reading called The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge, where he talks about different models that we face in life, and this one is called a limit to growth model. And how it works is it starts right here, and this is our target or goal. And for our purposes, our target or goal is increased active membership in the church. We come down to this box, which is the gap. It's what is stopping us from reaching that goal, and it is when members have doubts. We think when members have doubts, that's stopping us from increasing our membership, so we need to find a way to stop members from having doubts. And what we do, our corrective action, which goes right here, is we tell members who have doubts that they are sinning for having doubts. We scold them. We try to scare them away from their doubts. What this does is it causes members with doubts to kind of shut up for a little bit, temporarily stop expressing themselves. We think that we've done the right thing because these members who were expressing themselves with doubts aren't expressing themselves anymore. So in our minds, they must have stopped having doubts. But what is actually happening is that they're just growing in resentment. They don't want to talk anymore because they're going to be met with so much hostility. And this causes them to have even more doubts, which causes us to crack down even more and tell them they're sinning even more. And it's this endless cycle where we limit our own growth by trying to push a solution that doesn't work. And we never are able to reach our goal of increased active membership. So that's what this limit to growth model looks like in the church, and that's what we're facing right now. So in case you're wondering why it's even worth it to go after members who have doubts about the church, I found a couple of quotes, and I know there are more, by authors who are very active in the church, who have been published in Deseret Book, and they speak about doubt as not something that's dangerous. And the first quote that I found was by Terrell and Fiona Givens in their article that's entitled "Doubt Doesn't Have to Be Dangerous." They say the Apostle Hugh B. Brown referred to doubt as an apprenticeship on the path to belief. Doubt can have a crucial role in the life of the disciple. Second quote I found is by Adam Miller in his book Letters to a Young Mormon, published in 2014 in Deseret Book. He says, "Not believing it just is for some people, and it's not something they chose or could magically unchoose. Though this common sense godlessness can make things harder, it too can open a path to practice faith. It may free you from common sense idolatry." So these two quotes really speak of doubt as something that can be potentially useful in people's lives, and I don't think it's very productive for us to think that all doubt is bad. Whenever someone doubts anything about the church, that's automatically bad. I think that it can actually, in some cases, help people have even more faith later on in their lives. So this section is going to be about kind of specific training, specific things we can do to change. When we're confronted personally with members who have doubts, with dissension, right now what we might do is we might fall into this kind of pattern where we boldly disagree. We emphasize the superiority of our position. We state our reasoning for our position, and we try to intimidate the opposing point of view. And what I mean by that is it will look something like this. Our friend will approach us, maybe, this is a hypothetical example, obviously, and our friend will say, "I think women should be ordained to the priesthood." We become so shocked that our friend would have this kind of opinion, this kind of doubt, that we immediately go into this pattern where we boldly disagree. Then we state the superiority of our own position. We say, "I stand with the prophet, and I know he won't lead us astray." We state our reasoning for our position. We say something like, "Women don't need the priesthood because they are already more righteous than men," whatever our reasoning is. "Women don't need the priesthood because the prophets said they don't," whatever our reason is for the reason we believe. We state it, and then we go on to try to scare them or intimidate them. We say something like, "You shouldn't openly oppose the prophet. People with the testimony of the church don't act that way. You're evil," or whatever. We probably wouldn't say that, but we do something to kind of try to scare them, discourage them from having that doubt. And this is really counterproductive, as we've modeled before. But going over some specifics of what this does, this kind of tactic, is it oversimplifies our friends' doubts. Makes them feel illegitimatized, which is a real word if you want to look it up. Makes our friends feel othered or inferior. It fosters animosity between us and our friends, and it makes us feel separated from them. Again, we get into that they language, which really isn't good because it takes us away from the standard that the Lord has set for us in the Doctrine and Covenants and in other places, when he says things like, "If ye are not one, ye are not mine." So what we may try doing instead is we should legitimize the opposing concern, legitimize the reasoning behind the concern. We should be open to new solutions and ideas, seek for a middle way between our opinion and our friend's opinion, respectfully state why we may still disagree. We don't have to change our opinions about anything, but if we do disagree, we should state why we disagree respectfully after we've already tried to listen to their ideas, and then we make it clear that our disagreement does not make us any less of friends, which is really important. So what this looks like, let's say our same friend comes with us in the same opinion. Instead of reacting the first way, we say, "I totally understand why you feel that way." We legitimize their position, we legitimize the reasoning behind their position, and after we listen to whatever the reasoning is, we say something like, "That makes complete sense to me. Women's equality is a big issue for me too." We ask them maybe, "What do you think the best solution to this perceived problem would be?" We're seeking for solutions, we're listening. We say something like this, where we respectfully disagree with them. We say, "I don't necessarily think my opinion is better than yours, but I believe that women's ordination is not the path we should pursue. Maybe there are other solutions to this problem that will satisfy both parties." Again, we're disagreeing, but we're also seeking a middle way. And then we make it clear that our disagreements will not affect our friendship. We say, even if we never end up seeing eye to eye about this issue, realize that our relationship will not be affected, and I will still completely respect who you are. So what this tactic accomplishes is it legitimizes our relationship. It makes us know that there aren't conditions on our friendships. It doesn't matter what our friends believe, we're still friends, we still love them. It makes our friends feel better about who they are and who we are. It gives us more credibility in their eyes. It fosters unity between us and them. It lowers contention. It creates understanding. Really, it brings us closer to this ideal the Lord has sent for us of unity. If you are not one, ye are not mine. And this ideal which he has called Zion, when we are of one heart and of one mind. So remember, our friends came to their opinions and conclusions reasonably and rationally. They don't need to hear that they haven't thought about it enough or that they don't have a testimony. This is not how they feel about themselves, and this will not make them feel well about us either. And really, the LDS Church and the leaders of the church, we're actually striving to do this already. When, for example, the church has released a couple of essays that are found on the Gospel Topics section of LDS.org, which really add transparency to a lot of historical issues as a way to reach out to people who have fallen away over those issues. The LDS Church also owns and operates a website called MormonsAndGays.com, where the goal of the website is to seek a middle way between proponents of same-sex marriage and members of the church, find things that we agree on, find common ground where we can kind of have a civil dialogue. You've also seen, for example, Elder Christofferson on PBS, I think, and Elder Oaks make some public appearances where they've taken questions and provided answers to people who have asked. And even though people still criticize these moves by the church, they are steps in the right direction, and the brethren are sending a clear message that we need to make those steps in that direction to reach out towards the doubters and those who have questions among us. And the key is acting sympathetically and reaching out and really trying to show that Christ-like love for all people. I'm going to end with an anecdote about my friend who isn't a believer in the church. He hasn't been baptized. Maybe he will never believe in the church. He struggles over things like the Book of Mormon and the prophets. It's really hard for him to believe in those things, but he really loves the LDS community. He lives all of the standards, keeps all of the commandments, but he often feels isolated, and I think that's really sad because he's not being treated badly because of who he is, because he's a great person, but because of what he believes. And even though he lives all the standards, he still really feels isolated because he doesn't have the right beliefs. And I find this extremely disappointing. Our church is bigger than just what we believe in. It's who we are. It's the community we build. And we need to foster that kind of unity within our church. That's the only way we're going to bring back members who have fallen away and really get close to the ideal of Zion that the Lord has set out for us. I know there are other people like my friend. I'm sure even you who are listening may know people just like him, and I think it's really time for us to reach out to people like that, and really all people, and show them that we have a place for them in our church. So in summary and in conclusion, how we think about dissent currently in the church is not productive. There are solutions we can strive for, and if we fix the problems we are facing, we can strengthen LDS active membership as well as the community. I left with this picture of Bishnu from Meet the Mormons. If you remember, he's the one where his father isn't a member of the church, but he still shows respect for his father's beliefs, really reaches out to all people, strengthens his community, and he's really just an overall great person. And I believe we should all strive to be like him, really strive to be like Jesus, and be outreaching to all people around us, whether they have doubts, whether they believe, whoever they are, whatever they look like. So that's my presentation. Here are my sources. Feel free to look them up. Again, I'm not a professional podcaster. I've never done anything like this. So feel free to email me, leave comments, let me know where I've messed up, what I can do to get better. Just anything, any feedback you have would be great. I also believe that this is a very important message and that it should be shared with a lot of people. So feel free to share it with whoever you want. And I just invite you all to apply the things that we've talked about in this presentation. So thank you so much for listening. Again, my name is Michael Keith, and have a wonderful day.